which religion is right or wrong? It's safe to say that the answer is all of them. You're all right and you're all wrong. You have to understand that you're all praying to the same God. Every one of you. If you pray to a single God, you're all praying to the same damn God. It's the same power, same creator of the universe. Most of your creation stories are similar, come from similar places. And the thing to understand is that you're all right and you're all wrong. The way religion started, I was having a thought this morning, and I'm just going to ramble. I'm going to ramble about religion. And you're going to notice that I'm not going to quote any Bible verses. I never do. I don't need to. Because here's the thing. Someone who quotes Bible verses at you, they're using them like a dart. They're using it as a weapon. It's a jab. It's a tactic. And it's just a debate tactic. And I understand that debate tactic. And the reason I understand that debate tactic is because I went to one of their damn schools for 3 years and understand their tactics. So if they're shooting a Bible verse at you, understand it's just a dart. They're hoping to hit, strike home, and get a kill. But it also shows a lack of understanding. Very often they're taking these things out of context. They're not legitimate in their usage of a Bible verse. They're simply used as weapons. And they say, well, it says it in the Bible, so it must be true. But it's a lack of understanding of the meaning of the passage. So when I talk about theology, I'm not talking about Bible verses. I'm never going to use Bible verses. I will talk about a passage and the meaning of it. And what God's lesson was for us within that passage, perhaps. I will certainly do it when speaking to others about theology. I'm not going to quote the single verse no, I know those ones. I do. I was taught them. I was taught those tactics. And I knew they were wrong then. 12, 13, and 14 years old. I knew they were wrong then. And so I will never do that. But what is religion? Religion is really just ritual. If you understand that you're all talking to the same God, the same power, that consciousness that we call God, it's the same one. But yet you're all bitching at each other that only you are going to heaven, which seems very odd. And I think it's a worse problem here in the United States. And for this simple reason, we had a denomination explosion here in the United States. It's really unique to the United States to have a denomination explosion. So many churches with different rituals, but all speaking to the same God. I mean, you've got the Methodists, the Episcopals, the Mormons, the Southern Baptists, the Evangelicals. I'm not even sure what they're doing. And it goes on and on and on and on, and just so many denominations. And so many of those denominations all think that only they are going to heaven. Oh but you're all praying to the same God. Religion becomes dangerous when we use it as a way to oppress. You know. I like religion. Really from a curiosity standpoint. You know, I mean, as far as religion, because religion really is ritual. It's a ritualistic practice in how you worship God. That's what religion is. A ritualistic practice in how you worship God. That's religion in its basic meaning, understanding what it is. And so I'm trying to think right now. I really don't. I have no religion. Because I find I don't need one. But that's me personally. That's just me personally. I totally believe in God. I know who He is. I know who He is. And He guides me. And I draw on the power of His creation from time to time to get things done. But I can't really think of a ritual that I observe in that worship. It's more just a communication thing. He says, go in this direction, I go in that direction. And try not to think about it too much. But yeah. So in that literal sense, I really don't have religion. But I love churches. I love going into churches. I like the history. I like the architecture. You know, but the purpose of a church, because here I am. Well, I'm going to talk about the passage, not quote a verse. But what did Jesus say as a church? When two or more come together in my name. So, when two or more come together in my name, that's a church. And so, you know, the only requirement, being human beings, is that you have a place to meet. And if the weather is foul and you still want to meet in that same place, then you build a shelter. And you call it, that's your church. But the open fields, before you built the shelter, that was your church as well. The shelter itself was for protection of the people inside. And then what we fill that church with, and we could call it other things. We can call it synagogue. We could call it mosque. We could call it temple. The practical purpose of all those things is to shelter you from the elements while you worship God. What we fill that space with, or how we construct that space, depends on our vision of what brings us closer to God. And so that's the other purpose that a church fulfills. Does this make me feel like, yeah, there's God here when you walk in the door? And so, yeah. But God is just as happy to meet with you in that field. With no building. With no grandeur. With no gold. And so, you know, just to touch on, this is getting off base, but I'm just going to ramble anyway, so it really doesn't matter. the similarity, because I've looked into I like other belief systems, I like other religions, I do. When I was overseas, I did 2 tours in the Middle East, one in the Sinai Peninsula, and spent a lot of time in Cairo and that area. And then the other time was Saudi Arabia, but my interactions with the locals was very limited, so I didn't get to have these nice little discussions. But in the Sinai Peninsula, that was a peacekeeping mission, and I was a protocol NCO, and so I got to talk to people. And I would, and I went to, and I talked to them about the Quran, and talked to them about, their religion and how they thought about it and how they felt about it, and talked to them about the geopolitical, constructs, because Egypt was, more westernized than some of its counterparts, and I found that too as you kind of go up the coast, to Jordan. It's very westernized, and kind of the further, east you go, the less, until you get to more water again. But that tends to be a construct of man anyway, isn't it? Within civilizations, we tend to, in largest numbers, flock around water, bodies of water, because of why? There was trade. That was the initial reasons. And now there's water sports and all kinds of neat things. So people like to live around water. So our places that live around water have always been more liberal anyway. I mean, Venice. Think about Venice. How liberal it was among Europe. According to Venice. That's where the artists are. That's where the new ideas are. That's where the freedom of expression is. It's surrounded by. What's it freaking sinking into? Water. And it's still known as the same thing. So anyway, in small part, and then I spent a lot of time at Mount Sinai, because there's a cathedral there. It's called St. Catherine's, and it's right at the base of the mount. I mean, literally right at the base. And it was built over what they think is the burning bush. Only because it's a very strange planet. It's apparently the only one of its type in existence, and it's just right there. And so they built the church kind of over it. And St. Catherine's is interesting, and because I like history, and prior to going into the military, I was studying a lot of medieval history and all the kings of Scotland, of England. I was studying a lot of English history at the time. So the medieval knights and all that stuff. Well, getting to St. Catherine's, oh my God, that was a friggin' history gold mine. So you have to understand the layout, and I would love to get a satellite picture of it overhead, because you can see how it was built. And the original cathedral was just a small little cathedral that was inside, and it had, I think there's only 12 monks that are ever there. I don't know, I'm not sure how they work the numbers. I know there's only 12 graves. And they rotate the bodies out. But I'll get back to that. The chapel itself has these very tiny little pews. It's very classic little kind of cathedral church. Very small though. And at the back now, This is what the tourists get to see, because the big gates open, big gates, I mean, they're ancient. But they were built later. They were built by the Crusaders, who built this wall around the cathedral. The cathedral itself was built in 300 AD. So very, very old, and very, very basic, and very, very bare bones. And now rests the body of St. Catherine in this preserved state. At the head of the church, but behind her then is the burning bush that is growing half into the cathedral itself, because they built it with a notch so that it went over the bush itself. So if you go to the back of the chapel, then you see the rest of the bush. Now, but that's all the tourists get to see. The grand doors open, and then they open the doors to the church, and you can go and go to the point where you can't go any further and see the body of St. Catherine. I mean, it's not like there's a huge amount of people. I had never been there where there was a huge amount of people. A lot of times when I went, it was just... I mean, there was more people climbing the mountain than there really were anything else. And I might be mistaken about that in my memory, because I was allowed to go other places. I made friends with the one guy who spoke English in the place, and he happened to have been from Texas. He was a monk. And so I would talk to him, and we would just talk. And he showed me around the place. And I just kept going back. But I would bring him, like, because this was a UN mission. They had tons of money being pumped into this. Because you got to kind of, it was great for us. I mean, feed the troops. Holy shit. Are you kidding? We'll fill up on this thing. But I would bring him peanut butter and, like, newspapers. They wanted newspapers. And kind of as a group they did. And peanut butter was something they're craving. All right, I'll bring you peanut butter. And pizzas. Everyone, bring them like 3 or 4 pizzas. And just write it up there. And just go hang out for the day if I had nothing else to do. I'd usually, because I'd always find somebody who wants to go to St. Catherine's. Or somebody would tell me, we're going to St. Catherine's. All right. And I would just go down to the mess and grab some shit before we got. Jump in the car and go. And then once I got there, I would just hang out. With this guy. And I can't remember his name. I'm terrible at names. Really am. And it was a name that he changed to because they were Greek Orthodox, I believe. So anyway, I've always been bad with names. But one of the first things he showed me was this side room. He said, look, because the tourists are very gone. He said, look, and he opened the store and said that these are frescoes. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Because you have to understand that in the Middle Ages, all the frescoes were destroyed. There was this crusade to destroy all the frescoes. And a fresco is a painting made from wax. And so most all of them were destroyed. Well, St. Catherine's throughout history has been saved. It just has. Muhammad came through. I actually saw the letter. It was a letter from Muhammad stating, I will never destroy St. Catherine's. And it was given to them as like a letter of protection. I don't speak, Aramaic or read it. And so I took the guy's word for it. This is what was being said. But yeah, it was an actual letter given to the cathedral, or the monastery. I'm sorry, I keep calling it the wrong thing. St. Catherine's Monastery. Anyway, but yeah, the frescoes. So they were just off on the side room. It's like like a side closet, really, and they're just leaned one on top of another. They're in frames, most of them. Some of them not, but they're just kind of leaned there. They're not displayed. It's just it's like, yeah, I don't know, we don't touch them. Which was the basic sense of everything that I got from there. Yeah, we just don't we just don't touch it. Just do your thing each day, but we don't get into this stuff. But apparently it's the second largest collection of frescoes in the world, aside from the Vatican. It's there. And it's just really quite amazing. And then he took me to, I said that the central chapel was all that existed in 300 when they built this place. But the Crusaders came along not too much after that. I mean, several hundred years. And they built the great wall that goes around it now, and some of the really funky, cool stuff that makes it more like a castle in some sense, I guess. But it was built to house, there was housing for the Crusaders, probably the ones of rank at any rate. There was a feasting hall with these wooden tables that were the original wooden tables that they built. Because like I said, I mean, the monks weren't into, upgrading. They're like, we're taking the place as is. We'll live under a pile of rocks, it doesn't matter. So yeah, these big feasting tables. It was a pretty good sized hall. It has several tables, big thick ones, made from some kind of wood. Some biblical wood, I'm sure. Acacia. But what was interesting was you saw where, drunken knights would carve, their symbol or their crest or their, whatever, on the table or the walls, in the plaster, in the original plaster. They kept things clean, but see, here in the desert, the preservation is there. There's no moisture in the air, so nothing's going to rot. Then next door to that is actually the library. Oh my God, the freaking library. I thought I was going to have a stroke right there. I mean, it was just so exciting. The library. And apparently that is the largest collection of handwritten works in the world, aside from the Vatican. And it is just, I would love to get into it, but oh my God, it would take somebody with skill to go through papers that old. Scrolls, I mean, seriously, scrolls. And I wonder if it's ever been done, to be honest. I mean, I asked him, I said, do you even know what's in here? He said, no. Does anybody? Not really. So what is actually there? It's just amazing. And then he handed me this, we walked over to this desk within I'm just amazed. And I'm not touching nothing. I'm not touching anything. But that's where the letter was from Muhammad too. It was framed. And then below it, it's funny, because there was one from Napoleon. He said, yeah, Napoleon saw Muhammad and he did the same thing. I swear I will never destroy it or whatever. But he said it with, this sense of, whatever, Napoleon. But there was a letter from him as well. And there are parts of actually the the surrounding wall that Napoleon repaired, or whatever, because, I mean, over centuries and whatever, there were wars, and I think, part of the structure that the Crusaders had originally put up was knocked down. You can see a difference in the type of, the rock and the type of construction. You can see a difference between the two. And, but back to the library. He handed me this Bible, and it's encrusted in gold, and it's got jewels on it and shit. I mean, it's gorgeous. This Bible is thick. It's a handwritten Bible. And he said, yeah, we only use this on Easter, and we only read from one passage. And that's the only time it's ever used. And he handed it to me. And this thing's huge. It's one of these, like, picture your big family Bible encrusted in gold. This thing was huge. But he handed it to me. And I was like, oh my, here, just take it back, please. I know it's in it. I don't need to see it. Just take it back. I didn't want to hurt this thing. I didn't want to hurt anything while I was there. God, no. But it was just so neat. I would love to go back. If I ever go back, overseas, anywhere, that's where I want to go. That's where I want to go. In the back courtyard, at the back of the chapel, there's where the burning bush is on the outside of the chapel. There's this cannon that's in there, and when I brought the sergeant major up, because he was like, "Come on, let's go and put in a good word for me, so I can go, see some neat stuff." Because I was telling him about stuff after I got back. He's like, "See, get me in there," and so I did, and of course, gotta get the points. So anyway, the monk asked, we have question about this. We're not sure what this is and how it got here. And it's a cannon, but it's a breech-loading cannon. It's got a breech load like you would see on a M1 rifle. And apparently this is, that wall that is walling things up was put there by Napoleon when he was in Egypt. And we're looking at it because the histories don't line up there. As far as we knew, and maybe somebody who's better at canon than we were, knows whether or not Napoleon had that type of cannon available to him at the time that he was in Egypt. Because we're thinking it's of a later date, which of course creates the mystery. Because the only way that to get it into where that cannon is now, that cannon was walled in. Or that cannon is left there somehow. And the only way would have been prior to Napoleon building that wall. So yeah, that was a mystery. We couldn't solve it. But, And then climbing Mount Sinai, that was always interesting. I did it 3 times. Once I just climbed, that was the first time. And then the other 2 were races to the top. Because the sergeant major liked to make us do this kind of things. And actually I went up another time because I did do the camels, ride the camels to the top. But it's, as far as religion, it's just that ritual. That's all it is. That's all any religion is. Buddhism, there's a ritual. Being Muslim, there's a ritual. Being Catholic, there's a ritual. Being Protestant, there's a ritual. Being Southern Baptist, there's a ritual. Being Mormon, there's a ritual. Being Hindi, there's a ritual. And of course I'm going to leave some out because there's so many of them. But within every one of them there's a ritual, and that is what religion is. So whether or not a religion is good or bad, I suppose depends on your ritual. I mean, ritualistic sacrifice of human beings is now seen as, that's kind of bad. And I'm not sure there's tolerance for that anywhere in the world at this point in our history. But there was a time where ritualistic sacrifice of human beings was looked on as necessary. So religion is just a ritual. Now, why are churches so different? I mean, I was talking earlier about. Am I still recording? Yes. I was talking earlier about the denomination explosion within the United States. So many denominations, and then you go into. That's why I like churches. You go into them; they're all different. Catholic churches run about the same, and but you have these different types of churches depending on the type of denomination. And what I find within them is the amount that it's felt is needed to bring you closer to God. Because when we decorate our churches, our temples, our mosques, our synagogues, the lavishness of it often really expresses what a person feels they need in order to be closer to God. So I'm going to make a comparison. The other thing I've looked into, I've practiced what is known as witchcraft for, God, how long now? 2 decades, something like that. 18 years, something like that. I don't know. Long time. And Wicca is the religion. They'll say it's not religion. Yeah, it is. It's a ritual. It is a religion. But there's similarities I found that I can speak on anyway between Catholicism and Wicca. And where Protestantism, a more Puritan, bare bones idea. I'm getting tired. I don't know how much longer I can go on with this. But the comparison is simple. In order to explain what religion is, within Wicca, it always seemed to me that it was the amassing of trinkets to give yourself that sense of power. when casting a spell, I'll explain to you some of that. When casting a spell within Wicca, there's all kinds of rules. Use this candle and use these stones, and ring the bell 3 times. And, there's different things within the ritual, and it's individual to the person that is casting the spell as to how much they feel they need in order to bring that power within them and focus it to a single purpose. That's what a spell is. It's borrowing the energy that is around you and focusing it to a single purpose. Now, my understanding is that this is God's energy anyway. When I borrow energy from a plant, and I'm looking at my bean plants right now, if I were to borrow energy from them and focus it to a single purpose, I'm borrowing the energy of God. But anyway, within witchcraft, if you want to call it that, it's how much that individual witch needs within their ritual to actually be able to perform that task. And I just find I really don't need anything. I don't need to light a candle. I just simply borrow the power and focus it to a single task. Now, there's rules to it. There's warnings to it. That if you're going to do something negative, that negative is going to come back to you 3 times. And so there's a very conscious effort, for me anyway, to ensure that what I'm doing is simply a benign something. It usually amounts to me being able to acquire things I want with little or no money. That's what I use my witchcraft for. But yeah, that's all it is. But for many witches, or within even Wicca, and people getting into Wicca, it's that accumulation of trinkets. And so there's a big business from it as a result. And then you have Catholicism, which is kind of the same. It's kind of the Wicca of Christian religions. There's a lot that's needed within Catholicism. You have the saints, and you have the cathedrals that are just beautiful, gorgeous, wonderful, stained glass, and medieval and Gothic, and wow! And it seems there's a lot of stuff that's needed to make them feel closer to God. Versus the Puritan, or whatever you want to call him, the Quaker, who walks into a church that has nothing. It may have a wooden cross. But that Quaker feels just as close to God as that Catholic. Now, there's no right or wrong in that necessarily, unless wrong was done in order to gain that wealth to build that cathedral to honor God. Then that wealth is tainted in the eyes of God. But in and of itself, to seek out, one church over another, because here you feel closer to God, or here you feel closer to God, there is no wrong choice in doing that. And I was invited to a group online. It was it was a Mormon kid, and I call everybody kid who's in their 20s, inviting me, I would like to invite you to this, group. And it was a religious group, but it was about openly speaking about really theology. And I hadn't responded to it yet, and then there were two other responses, and these were people that were leaders of churches, and going off, saying these horrible things about this Mormon kid, and Mormonism, and you're going to hell, and they were both saying it. And so I responded. I was saying, I was going to politely decline this very nice invitation. But after watching you two, I may just join up. So I can view with a little tolerance. And so we started getting into it. These other religious leaders. Because they were both from different ones. They were both from different. They were both Christian religions, but Christian in their base ideology, I suppose. But they were different. I can't remember which two they were. It doesn't matter. But each were stating that theirs was the one that was right, and they were going to heaven alone. And so since I had two of them there proclaiming the same thing, but came from different, very different ideologies, very different denominations, I said, all right, which one of you are going to hell? You're both claiming that only you are correct. So right now, I want you to tell me which one of you, in your estimation, is going to hell. Because until this point, they were defending each other in fighting with me. And so I asked those two, which one of you, according to you, and your words, are going to hell? And of course they couldn't answer, and of course they stumbled, and of course all their arguments started to unravel. I like the Mormons. I think they're fun. They always seem very nice. They're always clean. They're always polite. What's wrong with that? I had some Mormon kids come to my door. Maybe it was a couple of years ago. And I talk to them. I like talking to them. But we have a college across the street. I have a college across the street. And so, they go to college. And it's part of kind of their service, their penance, to do this, it's really testimony. Testify. And you go door to door and testify, basically. And it's just kind of it's harmless. It's absolutely harmless. And they're so nice, and they're so polite. And so I talk to them. And these two kids come, and that's how I got a copy of the Book of Mormon. Now, I've never read it. I probably should. But I know enough about it that I just don't want to. But I was asking them questions, and I just ask questions. I would rather hear it from you than read it in the damn book. I want to understand, I want to know what your understanding of it is. I want to know your understanding of it. I don't want to read your book. I want to know your understanding of it. So I know that you have a clear understanding of the passage that you're talking about. And not simply throwing a dart at me by quoting a verse out of context. See, but that's true for all of them. And you really don't run into that dart throwing. I haven't with other religions. I just don't get it. When I talk to people about Islam, they're not throwing verses from the Quran at me. They're talking about the passage. They're talking about the meaning. They're talking about, hopefully the lesson. If you talk to a rabbi, he's not throwing Bible verses at you, not quoting name and number. Because that's just throwing darts. What he's doing is he's giving you the lesson within a passage. If you sit and listen, I like rabbis. And of course, rabbi means teacher. And that's the job of a teacher, is to let you know what the lesson is within whatever story you just read. This is a lesson. And so there's nothing wrong with the Bible. There's a lot of lessons to be learned from within it. And just because it was in the Bible doesn't mean that the lesson is it was good. Or even something that was, well, it still might apply. I mean, there's so much stuff talked about agriculturally within the Bible that if right now within our set of sciences within agriculture, we've moved past those basic, hey, don't eat the pork in the hot sun, or you're probably going to die, kind of lessons. And, that, I mean, it was stuff, you had to put it down and tell people, hey, don't be doing this stuff because you're probably going to die. But these were for health reasons. I mean, for God's sake, understand that. And the stuff about the planting and the sowing. You know why they were talking about that? Is because of agricultural diseases of the plants, and don't plant your plant here, and talking about early understanding of nutrients within soils, so that there was some guideline. These are biblical freaking guidelines, old Bible guidelines for agriculture. So the Bible is full of lessons. If we were ever to, go back to a time where we actually destroyed ourselves, then, and all our sciences are doing us no good, and we don't have the access to the fertilizers that we have now, or the pesticides, or the genetically altered seeds that we've come up with in order to plant and feed ourselves. If we were denied all that at some point in the future, then those agricultural ideas that you might find in the Old Testament, if that was the only book that were to survive, may do you some good. Don't eat the pork while living in the hot sun. And don't plant this plant too many times in the same soil. But when it's used as a weapon, then of course it's wrong. I started this out by saying that you're all right and you're all wrong. And it's very true. You're all right and you're all wrong. As a religion, there's people that understand exactly what I'm talking about. I'm sure that I am not the only person that is having the same thought at the same moment. But you have to ask yourself, because within, the Bible is the one I'm most familiar with. Now, I only have cursory knowledge of the other books, because I bothered to ask somebody about them. I have not been the avid reader to go read them all. Because I'm not searching for an answer, I suppose. There isn't a burning question within me, and a necessity to go read these. So I talk, no, the Bible is the one that I know the best. What we call the Bible, the King James Version of the Bible, the one that is typically known as the Bible. Old and New Testament, King James Version. That's the one I know best. And there are a lot of lessons to be learned within that book. There's nothing wrong within that book. How you use it could be wrong, of course. But there was nothing wrong within that book. It's simply full of lessons. If you believe that God came to earth in human form to teach man for a period, and believe the words, the limited words that were written down that he said, what were they? How was he teaching? How does God teach? How does God teach? God has always taught through parable. Always. It is through parable that God teaches. Now why does God teach through parable? Because the lesson applies to all. The lesson applies to all. The story of Noah. I know there are some that say, Genesis is the literal truth. But Genesis, in fact, is a mythology. Similar to the Greek. Or any other creation idea. Even at the time of Moses, they understood that they were, far removed from that ancient time. But within those stories, what are those? Parables. Parables. The story of Noah. What is the story of Noah about? Preparation. That's all it is. Preparation. Be prepared. You're only as prepared for that emergency, that catastrophe, that cataclysm as you are right now this very moment. That's the lesson of Noah. Now within the story of Noah, if you pick it apart and start going verse by verse by verse by verse, oh my God, which we would do each year, it would take about every year. And sure, you can read a lot of things into it, I suppose. There's a lesson about drinking. Noah got drunk. But it was really a story about preparation. That is the lesson to be gleaned. And if you talk to a rabbi about these stories, he would tell you the lessons. This is the lesson within the story. This is what you should glean from that. Don't worry about whether or not it was literal. The prodigal son wasn't a real person. Don't worry whether or not it was literal. Understand the lesson that was there. Now, there's other lessons to be learned as well. Lessons of what not to do. Lessons of what not to do. But if you listen to some, and it depends on your idea of God. We, as human beings, we anthropomorphize many things. We do it to our pets. I do it to my cat. He is my little boy. He's my baby, and he's my little man, and he has, human traits. And, he does, but his wants are very simple. But we tend to do it, and we anthropomorphize lots of things. And it could be an animate object, an inanimate object, but we do it often to God. We anthropomorphize God. And so what we have a tendency to do as human beings is to place our desire upon him. And so if you're an evil person trying to use or wanting to use religion in an evil way, you anthropomorphize God and place your desire upon him. Because in doing that, you've absolved yourself. You can blame God for your desire. And that's oppression. That's what people are doing that want to oppress others in the name of God. That want to oppress others in the name of God. And it's true for Islam, it's true for Christianity. And I'm sure it's true within some other religions. Where the desire to oppress or subjugate a fellow human being is blamed upon God, when it was simply your desire to oppress or subjugate. But he gives you perfect absolution. Or does he? And it's those people that will throw the darts of the Bible verse at you. They will throw the dart, hoping it sticks. Hoping you don't know more or as much as they do about what the hell they're talking about. But God is not anthropomorphized. He is not us. He does not have our perspective. Imagine God. This is God. Creator of all things. The one from whose energy the beginning began. And he alone will witness the end of each and everything. He will bear witness to the beginning and the end of each individual thing within his creation. That is God's perspective. Now, why would he put himself there as that, to do that? Curiosity. Why do we create anything? Curiosity. God gave to us an evolving earth and curiosity. And curiosity is not a bad thing. It's in the application of our discoveries that we make our mistakes. It's not in being curious. See, but God isn't out there recreating or destroying or actively... This is his creation. He's witnessing it. He's observing. everything that's going on. Isn't there something within your religion that God is actually watching you? In each and every one of them. That's kind of a common thread throughout all of them. God is watching you. And isn't that used so often within religion by leaders to keep people in line? God is watching you. And we preach of a God that should be feared and a God that should be loved. And there are different things that go on, but what freaks people out is there's this common thread throughout all religions that God is watching. But if you were to create something that was moving, that was evolving, as its creator, would you not watch? Is not observation the purpose of creation? And so to us, as a gift to us, he gave curiosity. Unfortunately, he also gave us the ability to carry out experimentation in the name of our curiosity, which has led to a lot of good and has led to a lot of bad. And this we call free will. But as part of his, he's not going to interfere too much because, you know what? I'm observing. God has a different perspective from us, but yet we anthropomorphize God. That is why the king could claim that I was appointed by God. Because we anthropomorphize God. And the dictator can claim he is God. Because we anthropomorphize God. But all these people are doing, the ones who subjugate, the ones who oppress, the ones who want to enslave people through religion, are simply anthropomorphizing God and placing their own desire upon him in an effort to give them self-absolution from a God who has a completely different perspective. Every country going to war says God is on their side. Which one's right? Which one is wrong? It depends what side you're on. Does it sound like God is going to get, God didn't create borders. He didn't even create a concept of a border. He gave us curiosity so that we would seek and explore. It was a gift he gave to us because it was a gift. It was something he had. It was something he understood. This joy of curiosity and observation. Because that's God's perspective. Curiosity and observation. Do you think he's just watching you? Do you think he's just watching you? Do you think he's just watching your country? Or watching over your country? Do you think he's just over your town? Or in your church? Do you think he's encapsulated so small? Like a genie in a lamp? God has a very different perspective. And if God is angry at man, it is over this one simple thing. You're actively destroying his creation. If you actively destroy his creation, it's not a natural thing, and you've created this anomaly within the experiment. Within the prophecies of, going forward and blah, 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 within the prophecies of the end, it was if you look at the Bible as a whole, you can see some of the prophecies being said. And if you were to look at it as a whole, which it should be done as well, not taken apart piece by piece and thrown as darts. If you look at the prophecy, within the story of Noah, it says within it that I will never destroy the earth again with water. Well, I'm not going to do it again with water. And so, the assumption is, well, it's going to be something else. If it's not going to be water, it'll be some other way. And, of course, now that we have nuclear weapons, and of course fire is thought of. Well, you're not going to destroy with water, maybe you're going to destroy with fire. But it's not that God is doing it, it's that we are doing it to ourselves. Whatever our end is now is predicted by ourselves. And that's what the prophecies within Revelations were saying. If you want to take it as prophecy, if you want to believe it as prophecy of a future, it is not that God is oh, man is so sinful, I'm going to... He doesn't need to. What he's saying is stop what you're doing because you're going to destroy my creation. And if that happens, it says also a new earth will be born. But don't go down that road. It's not, God has a different perspective than we do. And so those prophecies within Revelation, that was a warning sign. Stop, yield, slow down, caution. Because we are doing this to ourselves. We're doing this to ourselves. And within the book of Genesis, what did God ask of Adam? Within that parable that applies to every person. A parable applies to every person. And within that parable of God speaking to Adam, what did God ask of Adam? To name every animal. And be custodian of my creation. Custodian of my creation. Man, you have a lot of curiosity. You're doing things. You have the potential to do things that could be good or bad. And so be custodian of my creation. God has a very different perspective from ours. But yet we anthropomorphize God so he fits our perspective. And so every religion is both right and wrong.